If I talk loudly, will you guys give me more views? What's up, guys? It's Tom Ryan, and today we're talking about 5 filmmaking tips that no one else on the whole platform has ever talked about. Well, what's up, guys? Like I said, my name's Tom Ryan, and today we're going to talk about 5 filmmaking tips that not many people talk about. These are 5 things that I came up with just through experience and research and stuff like that. And I've just found that not many people talk about these things, and I wanted to share them with you. Before we start, do you like photography, filmmaking, tech, or content creation?
That's what I'm talking about.
Well, considering you're interested in those things, you might as well go ahead and click subscribe down below if you like content like this. I make this kind of stuff every week or as often as I can. So let's jump right into the first thing, and we're going to talk about bringing a white balance card with you all the time. I can recall so many shoots where I just, for some reason, forget to set my white balance properly. I either set it to auto so I just don't have to worry about it, or I'm shooting and I set my white balance and then the sky changes and something goes wrong. And when I get back into the editor, I have to fix that in post, and it's usually not that easy to do unless you're shooting raw. So if you're doing run and gun stuff, it's probably beneficial for you to bring along a white balance card or just a white piece of paper, something white. If you don't have a white balance card, it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it'll get you in the realm that you need to be, and then it's only small tweaking from there. I'll leave a link to the white balance cards in the description. They're super cheap, and you can get them on a lanyard so you can keep them on a keychain, and they're just really useful to have no matter what you're shooting. And like I said, if you can't afford that for some reason, God knows what, or like me where I just haven't gotten around to buying one, just bring around a white piece of paper and get a general idea of what your white balance is so your camera can calibrate it to what it should be. Moving on to number 2, and this would have helped me on a lot of shoots, is a list of things that you should be doing before you hit record. Just recently I shot a wedding, and my camera can do a digital zoom because it shoots higher resolution. What that allows me to do is zoom in just a little bit more even if my lens can't do that. And so I was shooting a wedding, and I had my second camera set up on the bride, and she was just a little bit too far away, and I couldn't go much further because I didn't want to be too obtrusive on the guests. Well, I forgot to set my camera to shoot at 4K instead of 1080 because I was shooting 1080 for a project that I had been doing recently. And so what happened was I digitally zoomed on 1080p footage, and if you know what that does, it basically just looks disgusting. There aren't enough pixels, there's not enough resolution for you to digitally zoom and retain the resolution, and so it just looked like crap, and I lost that shot. So a beneficial thing that you could have while you're shooting is a list of things that you should do before you ever hit the record button. I'm gonna list these off right now, and you probably wanna take these down. First off, we'll go back to tip number 1, and you wanna check your white balance. Make sure that your white balance is set properly so you don't have any issues in post with things looking unnatural. Number 2, you want to check your frame rate and resolution. Make sure you're shooting in the proper frame rate, and make sure that you're shooting in 4K if you want to shoot in 4K, or 1080 if you want to shoot in 1080. Number 3, check your exposure. If your skin tones are underexposed or overexposed, it's going to be a hard time bringing those back in post, so make sure your exposure is correct before you hit record. Number 4, you want to make sure that you 1, have an SD card, and 2, format that SD card. Number 5, you want to check your picture profile. If you want to shoot in a picture profile that looks nice right at a camera, or you want to shoot in a flat picture profile so that you have a lot more to grade with in post, just make sure you know what picture profile you're shooting with before you ever hit record. Number 6, check your battery life and check that you have enough batteries. You don't want to hit record and then run out of battery in the middle of a take. And number 7, you want to check your audio levels. Whether you're recording off-camera audio or you're recording right into the camera, make sure your audio levels are correct, because you don't want them to be too high to the point where they're clipping, or you don't want them to be too low so you can't bring them back up in post. Always make sure you do all of these things so that the process when you get into post-production and editing is as smooth and simple as possible. Moving on to tip number 3. If you're a vlogger and you don't have a camera that has a flip-out screen, here's an easy tip for how to get exposure. Set yourself up where you're going to be standing, whether it's next to the window or it's outside. Now rotate 180 degrees and put your hand where your face would be. Take your camera and get an exposure reading of your hand before you shoot, and make sure that it's properly exposed. Then you can flip your camera back around and start vlogging, and know that you're gonna have proper exposure no matter what. Having a camera that doesn't have a flip out screen for vlogging especially is super annoying. So use this easy tip to get proper exposure, make sure that your video is gonna be looking good for everybody that's watching, and you're not gonna have to do too much in post to correct it. Tip number 4 is something that I struggle with myself, and that is doing actual tests on your own with your gear and the stuff that you use. Now, I personally suck at this one. This is one of my least favorite things to do because I just think it's boring. It's just easier to look up the answer on Google or YouTube. We have so many resources, but it's beneficial to do tests with your own equipment and find out what works best for you. Do tests for picture profiles, do tests for your lens, do tests for the settings on your camera and the settings on your audio recorder and settings on your computer. Do tests for everything that you own and make sure you know what you're using and be comfortable with the gear that you have. And don't just take somebody else's word for it. Actually do the tests on your own and find out what looks best or what works best for you. Tip number 5 is gonna sound like an odd one, but you should shoot sometimes in 30 frames per second. Now, this is a weird one because I'm sure you've heard a lot of people say shoot in 24 frames a second. It's the most cinematic looking frame rate, and it's what's gonna make your videos look like movies instead of videos. So shoot in 24 frames a second, it's gonna look like a movie. And I'm here to tell you that that's not always the case. Sometimes shoot at 30 frames a second. The reason I say this is because you can take 30 frames per second footage and put it into a 24 frames per second timeline and slow it down by 80%. Now, 80% slow motion isn't going to be enough for people to really realize that it's slow motion, but it's going to give the illusion that it is slow motion. And subconsciously, it clicks in your head that it's slower or more smooth or nicer and flowier than just straight up 24 frames per second footage. What this is good for is maybe stuff like weddings or gimbal work. Now, I usually shoot a lot of my weddings like this, 30 frames per second, and the reason is it just looks a little bit more like a dream. It's kind of flowier and airier, and it makes things a little bit more smoothed out. And instead of 24 frames a second, which is, yes, a little bit choppier, it's what we're used to seeing, but it is a little bit choppier. It's what makes things look cinematic. Shoot at 30 frames a second and slow it down by 80%, and it's just gonna look a little bit more smooth and a little bit more dreamy. Now, I know I said there were 5 tips, but I wanted to give just one extra bonus tip, and this is only for Sony shooters or for people who can charge their camera with a cable. If you shoot with a newer Sony camera like I do, you'll know that the batteries are really expensive. They're about $80 a piece from Sony themselves. And this isn't as expensive as some of the higher cinema cameras, but they're still pretty expensive, especially when you're trying to stay lower budget. And for a while, batteries, although it sounds like a necessity, it wasn't really a priority for me at the price point. I wanted to invest in other things, and I didn't want to buy the only Sony batteries that were available, which were $80. And so what I did was I found out this hack while shooting a wedding, actually. So I have this giant battery brick. I would highly recommend buying one for anything. Doesn't matter if it's camera work or just having on the go in a tech bag or anything like that. But I have this battery brick. I think it's like 9,000 milliamp hours. So what I did was I took it and I gaff taped it to my monopod. And then I took my cable, I plugged it into the portable charger, and I plugged the other end into my camera. And it just charged the whole day. I left it inside the camera while I was shooting a ceremony, so it never died. I could shoot as long as I wanted to and it wouldn't die as long as that battery brick still had power. My camera was going to be powered throughout the whole day and it would charge. And I literally used one battery for a whole 12-hour wedding. So those are the tips that I came up with just from experience, and I wanted to share them with you. I wanted you guys to know about these because these are beneficial and they've helped me in the past. And I think that making films and doing run and gun work is a lot about efficiency and making sure it's easy and simple the first time. So when you get into post, everything is quick and snappy and easy. These tips will just help you get it done and right the first time so you can go into post and get your editing done and have fun and make good films. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, leave a comment down below and tell me why. I'd love to hear your feedback. I'm always appreciating negative or positive feedback. I just want to know what you guys think. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this, but that's going to do it for this one. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.